Laughter echoed throughout the auditorium. He pointed his finger, laughing disdainfully, as the girl knelt on the stage with a cloth in her hands. "Clean it properly, or you'll look bad in the company video," said the millionaire, with a sarcastic tone that made the guests laugh. She remained silent, swallowing her shame. She was dressed in a simple uniform with dirty knees and shaking hands, while the lights of the event shone on her like spotlights of humiliation. At the back of the stage, the screen displayed in large letters, "Innovation Giants Annual Conference," and she, crouched down, looked like a shadow there. He didn't know who she was, but everyone would know, and that public humiliation wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a twist that was as absurd as it was inevitable, because that very night that stage wouldn't be hers as a cleaning lady, it would be hers as the protagonist. The microphone clicked. The audience fell silent, and the same girl who had been cleaning the floor a few minutes earlier walked to the center of the stage with firm steps. The event director, visibly nervous, adjusted her blazer and announced, "Here you are, the guest expert of the evening. The woman who founded one of the most revolutionary social startups of the decade. Ladies and gentlemen, here you are, Ava Carter." The millionaire turned pale. She raised her face, now made up, in a discreet but elegant dress, and looked directly at him. "Before we begin, I would like to thank the gentleman who gave me a dirty cloth to clean the stage. It was an excellent warm-up for stepping on it with dignity." The silence turned to embarrassment, and the humiliation changed sides, without her shouting, without her taking revenge. Only with the truth. If this twist caught you by surprise, just imagine what's yet to come. Like the video now, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this story that's just beginning. The downtown San Diego Convention Hall was buzzing with suited executives, cold LED lights, and an atmosphere charged with ego and expectation. It was the most anticipated night of the year for the tech industry's elite, the Giants of Innovation Conference. Cameras were everywhere, influencers were live streaming, waiters were circulating with crystal glasses. In the middle of this glittering universe, where money was not just power but a spectacle, walked Elijah Stanford, heir to one of the largest holding companies on the West Coast. Tailored suit, practiced smile, arrogant gaze. To him, everything and everyone was a stepping stone. Around him, friends laughed loudly, made jokes in fake accents imitating poor people, and mocked anyone who didn't have a famous brand on their chest. While the stage was still being set up with the last wires being attached, a worker in a navy blue uniform knelt to clean the floor near the lectern. Her name was Ava, but no one there seemed to care. She was just another one. Or so they thought. Bent down with her hair tied up in a practical way and her face slightly sweaty, she was cleaning slowly. There was something strange about her silence, something almost calculated. Elijah, upon seeing her, stopped talking and walked to the stage. He climbed up with the ease of someone who thinks he owns everything, and when he saw her kneeling there, he couldn't resist the impulse. "Hey, young lady, do your best there. The star of the night can't slip, right?" he said, laughing. His friends laughed. Ava didn't answer. She just looked into his eyes for 2 seconds, a look that disconcerted him, but he laughed again and left. The event coordinator, nervous, appeared backstage and whispered something into the sound technician's electronic device. Some important guests had not arrived yet, and the schedule would be adjusted. The stage would be used for a surprise announcement. The name of the keynote speaker had not been revealed publicly, only to the inner circle. Ava then finished cleaning, walked calmly to the side of the stage and disappeared through a curtain. Elijah didn't even notice. He was too busy telling stories of conquests that seemed more like scenes from movies than real memories. What he didn't know was that night, in front of all his followers, partners and sycophants, he would not only witness his greatest public shame, he would be the protagonist of his own humiliation. Ava grew up out of the spotlight in a forgotten neighborhood on the outskirts of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was one of those places where sirens seemed to be part of the soundtrack of childhood. The house was made of old wood, with cracked windows and a constant smell of mold. Her father had disappeared before she was 3. Her mother, addicted to prescription drugs, alternated between long absences and unpredictable outbursts. Ava learned early on to take care of herself. At 7, she was already making her own breakfast, packing her backpack and leaving for school alone, ignoring the looks of neighbors who whispered about her family. Even at school she was invisible, not because of her grades, which were always good, but because of her worn-out clothes, her shoes with holes, and her always empty lunchbox. When she was hungry, she would wait for her classmates to finish so she could collect the leftovers from the cafeteria tray. It was humiliating, but she never stopped studying. She would read in secret in the library storage room and watch educational videos on the old cell phone a neighbor gave her. There was no one to applaud her quiet achievements, but she kept going. At 16, her mother was hospitalized after a mental breakdown. Ava was left alone. She worked as a cashier at a supermarket at night and studied in the morning. She lived in a small rented room in the back of an elderly woman's house who took her in without asking for anything in return. It was there that she discovered her passion for programming. A donated computer, borrowed internet, and sleepless nights teaching herself to code. In less than 2 years, she created a simple platform to help young people organize scholarships. The platform soon spread to public schools in the area. She won a local competition. The prize was small, but the recognition was enough to attract bigger attention. She was invited to speak at small fairs, then at larger events. But she always kept a low profile. She never forgot where she came from. So when she was invited to speak at the Innovation Giants Conference, she made one request of the organization, that no one know her identity until the moment she presented. She wanted to be observed. I wanted to feel who they're still judged by appearances. And most importantly, I wanted to be sure that their value would never depend on a badge. In the VIP lobby of the event, surrounded by influencers, CEOs, and young heirs, Elijah relaxed in a leather armchair while frolicking with a glass of expensive champagne. He was surrounded by men dressed like him, all proud of their surnames and the figures printed on financial portals. When one of the guests commented that the conference was full of too many ordinary people, Elijah laughed. He said that nowadays even delivery men and janitors think they are entrepreneurs just because they have a LinkedIn profile. The group of friends laughed out loud, drunk on arrogance. That was when another friend, laughing, pointed to Ava, who was passing discreetly with a bucket and a floor cloth. "That one over there, Elijah. Go over there and bet us. If you can get that cleaning lady to go on stage before time, we'll bank you in next week's investment fund. 3 million. How about that?" he challenged mockingly. Elijah glanced at her, raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Deal, but it's going to be so easy that I want to double the bet. If I make her go on stage and clean it right in front of everyone, you double the stakes. If I lose, I'll take my name off the table." Laughter, applause, more champagne. Meanwhile, Ava was continuing her work. She knew she was being watched, but she pretended not to notice. She had learned from an early age to listen to the environment with her eyes, and the muffled laughter of those men followed her like a venomous whistle. When Elijah approached, pretending to be polite, she already knew there was a trap. "Excuse me, miss. The stage still has some visible stains. Could you clean it better up front?" he said, forcing a polite tone. The lapel microphone which he would use during the presentation was already on, and what seemed like a banal request was actually part of the game. Ava calmly replied, "Of course, sir." "Where exactly?" He aimed with his expensive shoe right in front of the central podium. "Here. The stage lights are shining right on it, you know. We want the star of the night to shine. It would be a shame to trip over a bit of dirt." Some guests heard and laughed. She walked to the indicated spot, knelt slowly, and began cleaning. The audience, which was beginning to arrive, watched the scene without knowing the context, but for those who did, it was like an exclusive theater of power. And when she lowered her head, Elijah took 2 steps back, raised his arms theatrically, and said loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, make room. The Queen of Cleaning will make sure no millionaire slips today." Laughter spread. Cameras captured it, and the silent humiliation became a spectacle. Ava finished scrubbing. The indicated spot calmly folded the cloth and stood up without rushing. Laughter still echoed around her, but she kept her expression serene. Elijah remained on stage, making sarcastic comments to his colleagues in the audience. When she passed him to get off, he extended his hand as if to help her, but the gesture was theatrical. She stopped for a second, looked at his outstretched hand, and then at his face, and declined with a restrained smile. "Thank you, sir. I can walk." This moment, although brief, caused an awkward silence among those watching. Elijah tried to laugh to get around it, but his expression revealed slight discomfort. Ava, on the other hand, walked firmly to the backstage. Meanwhile, he commented loudly, "See? She's too proud for someone who makes a living cleaning stages." One of his friends replied, "Maybe she thinks she'll be a CEO one day." Laughter. Backstage, Ava went to a small support room where she quickly changed out of her uniform. She put on an elegant, discreet but neat blazer. She tied her hair up in a different way, adjusted the light makeup she was already wearing, and put on the shoes that were stored in her backpack. It was as if she had left a character behind. When she returned to the hallways, few would recognize her as the same woman who had been cleaning the floor minutes before. And that was what she wanted. Elijah, outside, was already bragging to his friends. "I paid the bet. She cleaned the stage. Everything was filmed. You can thank me later." He didn't know anything, not yet. On the big screen, the event sponsors appeared one by one, and then the sound system announced, "In 5 minutes, we will begin the evening's main lecture. We ask that everyone take their seats. The special guest will make her presentation on the main stage." Ava waited behind the curtain, standing, with her eyes fixed and her face serene. The technical coordinator handed her a microphone and smiled. "Go for it. They have no idea." Meanwhile, Elijah was laughing in the corner of the stage, pointing to the audience and telling them what he had just done with the cleaning lady. One of his friends, curious, asked, "Who is this secret speaker anyway?" Elijah shrugged. "She must be another one of those empowerment coaches who talk big but never actually do anything." Ava, on the other side of the curtain, heard and smiled. She took a deep breath. She was ready. The entire room went dark. The blue stage lights came on. The conference theme song echoed through the speakers, and all attention turned to the main screen. At the bottom of the screen, a countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, silence. And then, the announcement. "Here is the founder of the EduBridge platform, internationally recognized for transforming the lives of thousands of low-income youth in the United States. Ava Carter." The name exploded in letters on the screen. A spotlight illuminated the stage, and Ava entered. The audience applauded in confusion, trying to understand who this woman was. Elijah at first did not react. He just stared. His face began to contract silently, his eyes searching for some error in the system. But there was no error. The cleaning lady he had just used as a toy was the star of the night. When she began to speak, her voice was calm, controlled, firm. "Good evening. Before we begin, I need to tell you a story. A few minutes ago, I was on this stage, not as a speaker, but mopping the floor." A murmur went through the audience. Elijah swallowed hard. Ava continued. "I was invited to speak here about social innovation, but before that, I lived through a test, one of those that the world gives when it thinks no one is watching." She paused, walked softly across the stage, and then concluded, "I agreed to come with a simple request, that no one know who I was until the beginning, because I wanted to see who still measures value by appearances." Ava did not raise her voice, did not accuse directly. She spoke with disconcerting mastery, without irony, just facts. Some may think that social position defines intelligence, value, or destiny, but I grew up in a place where opportunities did not knock on the door, so I had to open windows with my own hands. The audience was silent. Elijah lowered his head. He felt that each sentence was a mirror. Her friends, who had been laughing before, now looked away. And when Ava concluded her introduction with the phrase, "That's why I prefer to provoke reflection," before inspiring, the silence became uncomfortable. But there was something even more symbolic. One of the conference's main sponsors was the philanthropic institute founded by Ava, and this was displayed next on the screen. Gold sponsorship, Carter Institute for Education and Equality. Elijah read the name and it hit him. There was no way to run. He had ridiculed the event's host. On national television, the audience, which had been silent until then, began to applaud loudly. Some stood up. Others recorded the scene, and while they applauded, Ava stood firm, as if all the humiliation she had experienced had been transformed into steel. Elijah, pale, discreetly stepped down from the side stage. The bet had been won, but not by him. Ava took a deep breath before changing the direction of her speech. The audience was already captivated, but she wanted to go further. It was time to turn the mirror on everyone. "I knew it," she said calmly. "From the moment I walked into this room with hay bucket in my hands, I knew exactly what was going to happen." The sentence caused a small collective shudder. "I knew they wouldn't recognize me, that they would judge my worth by my uniform, by the floors I cleaned, and not by what I built." Her voice didn't shake. There was no hurt in her tone, only conviction. Then she walked to the center of the stage, looking directly at the row where Elijah and his friends were standing. "I knew about the bet. I heard every word, even the amount involved. 3 million, right? And if I cleaned it well, I would double it." Someone gasped in the back of the room. Elijah clenched his fists. She continued, "But you see, I didn't accept cleaning the stage out of submission. I did it because I've been in much worse places, and because sometimes you have to touch the ground to remember where you came from." The audience was now completely silent. "Yes, I cleaned. But not for you, I cleaned for me. Because no stage, no matter how expensive, is worthy of receiving true words if it's covered in arrogance." No one moved. Cell phones were pointed, recording. Elijah couldn't keep his eyes on her, his eyes fixed on his hands. Ava continued, "For many years of my life I cleaned bathrooms, hallways, cafeterias. I did it without shame. And it's not now that an expensive leather shoe will diminish me." The audience began to applaud, this time in unison. But Ava raised her hand for silence. "This isn't about me. It's about everyone here who has been judged by how they dress, where they were born, how much money they have in their bank account. It's about remembering that everyone deserves respect." There were discreet tears on some faces in the audience. Ava's speech had crossed protocol. It touched on something raw, essential. Elijah got up from his chair, still unnoticed. He tried to leave discreetly to the side, but someone saw him, and the buzz started. Ava noticed, but didn't comment. She just looked at the audience and said, "I end this speech with a single truth. Those who don't know how to bow to their own origins will never stand up in the face of the future." And she left the stage to genuine applause. Elijah left the auditorium under a storm of stares. He felt the weight of embarrassment building on his shoulders, as if each step echoed a guilt he couldn't quite name. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket, but he didn't answer it. Comments were already popping up on the networks. Videos, cuts, headlines. "Millionaire humiliates speaker without knowing who she is." "Ava Carter silences the elite with devastating speech." "Cleaning lady? No. Millionaire founder." He went to the backstage lounge where few had access and threw himself on the couch. He ran his hands over his face, trying to understand how everything had gotten so out of control. In a corner, on a table with event material, he saw a folder with the EduBridge logo. He opened it. There were data, numbers, statistics, and a biography. He read it slowly. Ava Carter, born in Albuquerque, daughter of a single mother, former public school student, founder of the Carter Institute, creator of the platform that is now used by more than 3 million vulnerable young people. He flipped through everything. He saw photos of her as a young woman receiving awards, shaking hands with senators, speaking at universities. There was one image in particular that stopped him in his tracks. Her at 17, handing out scholarship pamphlets at the door of a community library. He knew the place. He had been there before. By chance? No. His mother had taken him there just once, when he was 12, to a book distribution event for underprivileged children. The memory came to him like a blow. He remembered. She was there, a skinny girl with her hair tied up, explaining to him how to fill out a form. At the time he had laughed at the situation, but he remembered her politeness, her patience. "Are you good at math? There's a scholarship at this school." "Look!" Elijah's heart beat faster. That same girl had now confronted him without raising her voice. It was her, and he had made fun of her twice in his life. Once as a child, once as an adult, and in both she reached out. The weight of it crushed him. For the first time, Elijah didn't know how to defend himself. He looked again at the photo of young Ava holding the papers. She was smiling. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a smile of someone who believed in others. And he had spat on all of that. The arrogance he had nurtured so much now turned into a bitter taste in his mouth. She had won without shouting, without pointing, just by being who she was. In the following days, Ava simply disappeared. She didn't post anything on social media, didn't give interviews, and refused all invitations to programs and podcasts that wanted to turn her speech into a spectacle. The event organizers confirmed that she had left the hotel that same night and didn't say where she went. Elijah tried to look for her. He sent messages to the EduBridge team and called the institute's number, but all of them returned with formal responses. "Miss Carter is in a period of institutional silence," they said. He began obsessively revisiting the conference video. He repeated her speech on loop, trying to find something that would justify what he felt and what he had lost. For the first time, he wasn't angry about having been exposed. He was silent because he had been seen, all of him. Without the layers of success, money, or posturing, Ava had seen him from the inside, and that disarmed him. Social media was talking about nothing else. But as the days went by, the digital dust settled. Other controversies took their place, but Elijah couldn't forget. The bet, the arrogance, the way she reacted, or rather how she didn't react. No shouting, no attack, just truth and absence. He returned to the same hall for the event days later. It was empty, silent. He walked to the stage. He climbed the steps slowly. He looked at the place where she had knelt. Then he walked to the exact spot where she had started her speech. He sat down right there. For the first time, he felt ashamed without an audience, shame that came from within, and that hurt. He tried to talk to journalists who knew her, but no one wanted to cross the line between news and protection. Ava, by all accounts, was discreet by conviction, and she knew how to disappear when she wanted to. Elijah began to wonder why that affected him so much. It wasn't wounded pride. It was something deeper, longing, but not for a relationship. It was longing for an honest mirror. She had shown him something he didn't know he wanted to see, and in the midst of that emptiness, he began to write. For the first time in years, he picked up a notebook. He wrote down everything he thought about that night, about his childhood, about how much he had lost along the way. He cried, not out of pity, but because he realized that, without realizing it, he had become someone he himself would despise. It was late at night when he finished the last line. He closed the notebook and wrote on the cover, "For those who saw me before I knew I was blind." Ava's silence made more noise than any scandal. Within weeks, the effects began to accumulate. The investment firm that Elijah represented saw its social media following plummet. Hashtags like "humiliation is not marketing" and "justice for Ava" flooded the comments of his posts. Influencers, who had previously bragged about appearing alongside him, began deleting photos. Some sponsors announced that they were re-evaluating partnerships. The press dug deep. Reporters unearthed other public statements by Elijah over the years. Old videos in which he mocked low-income people went viral. Interviews in which he extolled meritocracy while mocking those who waste time on charity were re-edited with excerpts from Ava's speech. The comparison was inevitable and devastating. Guests at the event began speaking anonymously to the media. They said they knew about the bet, that he had planned the scene with pleasure. His laughter was louder than any speech of the night. One of them, in particular, handed over a copy of group messages with screenshots of the bet. It was all there. The amounts, the terms, the mocking emojis. The case exploded once and for all. The company's board of directors was pressured. One of the founders resigned. The holding company's shares plummeted. Elijah was temporarily removed for strategic reasons. But he knew the curtain had fallen, and for the first time there was no luxury that could shield him. In the city's cafes, at universities, on podcasts, Ava had become a symbol of elegance and resistance. But her name was invoked with caution, as if respecting the absence of someone who does not seek fame. Meanwhile, Elijah was cited as the classic example of corporate arrogance, memes, jokes, montages. But what hurt the most was the silence. Because Ava said nothing more, and yet she said everything. Social contempt did not come with shouting, it came with indifference. Events began to discreetly disinvite him. Magazines refused interviews. Invitations disappeared. Elijah walked the streets like someone who recognizes the echo of his own mistake in every glance he receives. And he didn't blame anyone. Deep down, he understood. He had made a mistake that cannot be erased with apologies. It was the kind of fall that doesn't break the body, but it does break the image, and that, in his world, was worth more than any coin. Elijah's departure from the CEO role, though announced as temporary, became a silent exile. Without the fast-paced routine of earnings calls and meetings, he found himself in an apartment that was too big, with too much time and voices of regret echoing through the rooms. For weeks, he didn't turn on the television. He turned off notifications. He stopped trying to control the narrative. For the first time, he didn't want to be heard. He wanted to listen. He started waking up early. He walked around the city with a cap pulled low over his eyes, trying to go unnoticed. He went into bookstores, sat in simple cafes. Sometimes he spent hours just observing ordinary people. Those who had previously seemed invisible now taught him with simple gestures. The waitress who smiled despite her fatigue, the elderly man who paid for used books with counted coins. Elijah wrote everything down, in a brown notebook he carried in his pocket. A new habit, a silent need. He sought out therapists. It took him a while to find someone who didn't try to flatter him. When he finally sat down in front of a woman who looked at him without admiration, only listening, he cried. He talked about his childhood, the absence of his father, his obsessive search for validation. For the first time, he didn't blame anyone. He just wanted to understand. He began to volunteer anonymously. At a public school on the outskirts of the city, he taught math to young people who were struggling. No one there knew his last name. He was just Professor Eli, and for the first time it was enough. He learned the names of his students. He listened to their stories. He laughed with them. And when he returned home, he felt something he hadn't recognized in years: lightness. In one of those classes, a boy named Jordan asked him, "Have you made many mistakes in your life?" Elijah smiled sadly and answered, "More than you. Should have, but less than you deserved." Jordan didn't understand, but he remained silent. And that silence was enough for Elijah to realize that he was on the right path. He began to study subjects that he had previously scoffed at: social education, empathy, spirituality. Not because he wanted to rebuild his image, but because he wanted to rebuild the man. And that could not be delegated. If before he wore designer armor, now he wore regret with dignity. It was not guilt, it was conscience. And this conscience, unlike in the past, did not need applause, only coherence. It was on an unexpected late afternoon that fate decided to cross their paths again. Elijah was volunteering at a community reading event at a public school. It was a quiet Saturday with an overcast sky and few people in the courtyard. He was organizing children's books at a small makeshift stand when he heard a female voice ask gently, "Can I leave some copies here?" He turned around slowly, and for a second he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but it wasn't his imagination. Ava was there. Light coat, simple jeans, hair tied up, calm gaze, as real as the first time. But there was something different. She seemed even calmer, more whole. Elijah, not knowing what to say, just nodded. "Sure," he replied, his voice low. Ava placed the books on the table, smiled slightly, and was silent for a few seconds. The air between them was thick, but not hostile. "I saw you in math class the other day," she said. "One of the students mentioned Professor Eli. I figured it was you." Elijah took a deep breath. "It is me, yes, or I'm trying to be." Ava didn't answer right away. She just watched. "You know, I've thought about answering you many times, writing, saying something, but I thought silence spoke better." Elijah shook his head. "It did. A lot." They both sat on the cement bench next to the bookshelf. For long minutes they said nothing. They just let time pass. Elijah then took the brown notebook out of his pocket. He showed it to her. "I wrote it to you, not to convince you of anything, just to let you know that I've changed. Not out of shame, but out of respect." Ava flipped through a few pages. Read individual sentences. Breathed. "I don't hate you, Elijah. I just chose not to expose myself to more pain." He nodded. "And you're right. You really shouldn't." She stood up, ready to go. But before leaving, she turned to him and said, "We only know that we've really changed when we don't want to prove anything to anyone. Keep going for yourself." He stood there, watching her walk to the school gate. The children continued reading, running, shouting around them, but time inside him was suspended. She had come back, not to forgive, nor to judge, just to show that she still existed, and that in itself was immense. The following week, a letter arrived at the front desk of the school where Elijah taught. It was a simple envelope with no return address, but his name, handwritten on it. He knew it immediately. He opened it carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, the handwriting firm, direct, clean. "I've thought a lot about that reunion, about what I felt when I saw you there. You've changed, Elijah, and that's rare. Most people just try to erase what they did, camouflage it, rebuild images, but you've shed the armor, and that's worthy. But it's not an invitation." He sat down slowly, read it again, trying to absorb each line as if it were the last. Gesture between them. It continued. "There's no resentment in me, no desire for revenge, but there is memory, and memories, even when transformed, leave marks. Some are wounds, others warnings." The words came like knives and balms. "You owe me nothing but your truth, and your truth is now beautiful. That's why my silence is not indifference. It's protection, of me, of you, of our story. May it continue in peace, even if it's far away." In the last line, "Thank you for not trying to justify yourself. Thank you for learning to keep quiet without running away. That's love too. Take care of yourself. Ava." Elijah closed the letter gently. He didn't cry. Not at that moment. He just stared at the empty schoolyard as the last students said goodbye. The folded paper rested on his knees. It was the end of a cycle. There was no new beginning in the romantic sense. There would be no new encounters or reconciliations. But there was a surrender and an acceptance. Ava wouldn't come back. Not out of anger, but by choice. And Elijah understood. There was no regret. There was gratitude. That afternoon he picked up the brown notebook and wrote, "Some loves don't need to last to be true. Some forgiveness comes without words, but with steps. And some goodbyes don't hurt. They heal." He closed the notebook. He put the letter between the pages. He got up and walked away slowly, as if he finally understood that certain presences remain, even after they're gone. Autumn arrived silently in that city. The trees in the Central Park dropped their leaves as if they understood the weather without complaining. On a pale Sunday sky, Elijah walked slowly, the brown notebook under his arm. He sat on the same bench where, months before, he used to watch without seeing. Beside him, he left a copy of a children's book with a handwritten dedication. "To Jordan and all who still believe, with love, Professor Eli." Children ran around. Some stopped to look at the book. Others went on without noticing. He just smiled. He no longer needed to be noticed to feel whole. Deep in his pocket, he carried a small folded sheet of paper. He no longer opened it. He just knew it was there. And that was enough. When a stronger breeze passed, he looked up. The leaves were falling slowly, dancing before touching the ground. And for a moment, it seemed like everything was at peace. If you've come this far, it's because something in this story touched your heart. So comment below. Some silences say it. All just so I know you stayed until the end. Take the opportunity to leave your like. It really helps this channel to continue bringing stories like this. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and activate the bell. And don't forget, the next video that's playing on the screen will also move you. Click there and find me in the next chapter.